lot of nuts!
I know this may come as a disappointment to everybody currently writing SumitoMedia fanfiction, but I am in fact not a furry. Though if I were to have a persona, I have to imagine I might be a scaredy cat. As far as I can remember, I have always had trouble sitting through scary movies. Horror in general just shakes me to my core. I don't exactly know what it is. I've tried playing horror games. They don't go super well. You guys have seen me on Internet Historian's live channel trying to deal with relatively spooky tropes while buying a house in a role-playing game, and even that got my heartbeat racing. I do want to clarify that I love horror as a genre, just as much as anyone else who can sit through every scary movie in existence. Even though I can't do that, the shivers that I feel down my spine when something makes me feel creepy in just the right way, I enjoy that just as much as everyone else. But jump scares just kill my vibe, bro. I believe it started in high school. I had a group of female friends that I was mutually friends with through other friends, and they invited me and a group of my boys to come over and watch scary movies. And my choices were to go and watch scary movies with a bunch of girls that I'm making a first impression with, or get no bitches. So naturally I went to the movie night. We watched Case 39, starring Sandra Bullock, and that movie has so many jump scares. It's not even that scary of a movie as far as horror movies go, but there's so many jump scares. Like 20 minutes into the movie, everybody else is sitting on the couch watching the film. I'm in the kitchen just hyperventilating because I can't look in the direction of the TV anymore. And I've just never recuperated from that. This pattern continued through basically the rest of high school, as basically everybody figured the best way to get into a girl's pants is to first have her piss herself while watching Insidious 2 with you on the couch. As a proxy, I watched a few more horror movies all throughout high school. I've seen some of the classics, The Ring, Insidious, this and that. The problem with not liking horror movies is that as a student of comedy, like, you can't ignore the trope in its entirety because so much comedy is based on classic horror. Look at the original scary movies from the Wayans brothers. Look at the episode of SpongeBob when they keep the Krusty Krab open until midnight. I mean, you gotta appreciate horror in order to appreciate comedy. Eventually, I decided I needed to catch up with some of these because it seemed like people were enjoying them, even if it was killing me inside every minute that I would sit through them. So I would do the next best thing. I would read the plot synopsis of these popular horror movies so that I could get the gist of what's going on. And it has been an incredible medium for me. I get the plot twists, I get the spookiness, psychological thrillers and stuff get explained in the details. I get to enjoy it through that medium. And over the course of like 10 minutes, I get a nice slight spooking, and I don't need to sit an hour and 20 minutes about to piss myself, worried something's gonna jump up on the screen at any given moment. Does this make me a giant baby? Yes, of course this makes me a giant baby. Did I get laid exactly 0 times in high school? Yes, I got laid exactly 0 times in high school, but there is a bright side to this. Because I spent so much time reading the plot synopses to these horror movies, I have gained a strong affinity and expertise in the genre of horror that is through the medium of written text. Scary stories to tell in the dark, I guess, is... Ooh, that didn't come out as cool as I thought it would come out. So before you can appreciate two-sentence horrors, you kind of have to first appreciate the precursor, which is of course the age-old creepypasta. It's basically just a story. It comes from copypasta, which is just like a slew of words, or like a, what the fuck you say to me, you little shit, I'll let you know I have so many confirmed kills. You know, like the long blocks of text that people would just copy and then paste as like a meme. That is a copy pasta, a amalgamation of words that people sort of recognize as a whole, but individually is just sort of a shit post. Creepypastas take that to a next level by being basically nothing like a copy pasta, but still using the word pasta and being creepy. These have some classic examples like Siren Head, Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, Abandoned by Disney, Smile Dog. I'm sure you recognize some of these. Some of the more famous ones are lost episode creepypastas, which are basically, they try to pretend like they're real. They'll be like, hey, I used to work for Nickelodeon back when SpongeBob first started or when The Simpsons first started. Obviously, we can't go over every creepypasta that I've ever read because they're so incredibly lengthy, but I do want to touch on a couple that I feel are vital to the culture of creepypastas. The first one is Dead Bart, a person who claimed to be working for Nickelodeon or for The Simpsons at the time, sorry, was in the final producer's room. Basically, they would send you a basically finished episode and they would just do a final review of it to make sure that everything was okay. And they received a tape titled 7G06 for an episode of The Simpsons. They didn't know who wrote it. They didn't know who edited it. It just showed up in the film room, and they started watching it. And it started just like every other episode of The Simpsons, with them going on a plane trip. Bart breaks one of the windows, falls out, and then in a drastic change in attitude for the show, it has these hyper-realistic images of Bart's corpse just mutilated and destroyed on the ground. And the creepy part was all the detail in it didn't look animated, it looked hyper-realistic, it wasn't the art style, it almost looked like photographs of a real dead body. It was so crazy. After they saw the episode, the person who wrote the creepypasta claimed to have called the police. The police couldn't figure out who made the video. Nobody on the Simpsons team could figure out who made the video, and apparently he left a few months afterwards and nobody had ever talked about it since, and it became this whole thing. This was a great creepypasta. I read it in its heyday. I read it at a time where it wasn't just confirmed false. There was a little part of me that thought I had found this incredible story of a real thing that happened, and oh my god, what is going on here? How could I have bumped into such a gem of information? Why is nobody doing anything to save this kid who seems to have been killed in this episode of The Simpsons? It was ridiculous. Obviously, looking back at it, it was just, yet another story written for clicks on the web. But the quality of the writing, the realism that you felt, the attention to detail in this stupid little creepy story is really what brought it to life. A lot of these creepypastas are very samey. They follow a lot of the same story points, a lot of the same tropes, because at the end of the day, it is just sort of like amateur writing. If you watch the episode of In the Field with internet historian and Many Kudos, they do their own sort of creepypasta, and a lot of it feels familiar because it is just sort of all recycled storytelling gimmicks to make it as spooky as possible. A kid buys a used copy of Pokemon Red and he loads up the save file, but all the Pokemon have their heads ripped off and he's moving very slow as if he's poisoned, and there's a demonic voice every time he gets to a gym leader. Stuff that's just realistic enough to be plausible, just crazy enough of a story that has no validity to it that you can prove elsewise, so a little part of you believes that it might be true. Another one of the most famous ones that sort of follows the same idea as Dead Bart is Squidward's Suicide, otherwise known as Red Mist, which is told by the perspective of someone interning at Nickelodeon. And he goes to watch an episode, an unaired episode of the SpongeBob SquarePants. The type is titled Squidward's Suicide, which everybody just sort of laughs at, thinking it's like an office prank or something. And it starts with Squidward getting ready for a concert. He goes to perform the concert. Everybody boos Squidward, and then it cuts to a scene of him sitting on a bed with a shotgun. And slowly, as it zooms in on his face, as his eyes get more red, which is why it's titled Red Mist, there's this demonic voice in the background. Evidently, there's fast one-frame flashes of like dead babies and mutilated corpses. Eventually, as the voice tells Squidward to do it, he blows his brains out with the shotgun, and everybody in the room is sworn to secrecy. Nobody's allowed to say anything about what they saw in the video. The police are called, the photos are investigated. It was this whole spooky stuff. There's probably 100 more creepypastas that were written just like it. Interestingly enough, in the episode SpongeBob in Random Land in season 12, a real episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, he opens like a random door or a vortex or something, and it has a SpongeBob-esque rendition of Squidward with the red eyes. It's the creators of the show, the writers of the show, had obviously read this age-old copypasta and sort of paid a little bit of homage to it in a real episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, which is super cool to see. Although I think some of the writers had to backtrack and then explain on Twitter that this was just them giving a shout out to a piece of internet culture. They're not confirming any part of the Squidward suicide story was true. They said it is, quote, far from canon, and just want to lay a blanket statement that that definitely did not happen, wink wink. This is not a video about me showing how cool it is to read scary stories in order to validate the fact that I am unable to watch scary movies. That's totally not what I'm trying to do here. That is kind of what I'm trying to do here. Cupcakes is a creepypasta originally posted to the /co board of 4chan by Drecker Jones under the pen name Sergeant Sprinkles. In the story, Rainbow Dash visits Pinkie Pie after getting invited by her to the bakery. Rainbow Dash was told she'd be making cupcakes with Pinkie Pie. However, Pinkie Pie knocks her out with a drink. Rainbow Dash is taken to a dark room full of severed pony heads. Pinkie Pie states that she will be making cupcakes out of Rainbow Dash. The story describes the ways that Pinkie Pie mutilates Rainbow Dash to death, and the story ends with Apple Bloom joining Pinkie Pie, who is now making cupcakes out of Diamond Tiara. I don't remember this episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Original creepypastas were extremely long in length because they really sort of had to draw you into the story. Not only was the story itself relatively long and kind of detail-ridden, but it also had to set the stage of, hey, my friend sent me this game and he told me to destroy it, but I played it and it was a haunted version of Sonic. Or I used to intern at Nickelodeon, or this and that. It had to give some sort of plausibility to why this story might be reaching you and you specifically, and you should not tell everybody about it because there might be repercussions. And they became these 6, 7, 10-page long things, a lot of which was repetitive. It's basically impossible to read through any of these without bumping into the phrase mutilated corpses or hyper-realistic. It's just the same tropes over and over again. As time progressed, these horror stories became more condensed, more distilled, so that they could more quickly get you to the creepiness without wasting your time on the ambiance around it as people had started to get used to it, which I believe gave birth to the super short horror stories that we would first see on Tumblr and then later posted to the subreddit TwoSentenceHorror. Editors note this might not be the exact timeline of what led to TwoSentenceHorror, but if I didn't have all this backstory to lead up to it, this video would be like 3 minutes long, and I can't be expected to get everything right. I don't do research. I'm not some sort of historian of the internet, okay? I'm more of like a medium of the Sumeto, if you will. How can I explain TwoSentenceHorror? Well, I guess I just did. I mean, it says what it does on the tin. It's a subreddit on Reddit, and it's set up really cool because all the stories have to be 2 sentences, which means like the title of the post will be the premise or the setup, the thing that's gonna set up a preconceived notion of what's gonna happen, and then it subverts your expectations once you click into the post and see the twist in the story, and the best ones are really well done. All my life, my parents have told me not to open the basement door, but I got curious and disobeyed them. Very spooky. What could they be hiding in the basement that they don't want this kid to see? And then you get to the second sentence. What is that glowing ball in the sky and why does it hurt my eyes? Oh my God, the horror. He wasn't being kept out of the basement. They were locking him in the basement. I'm kind of like joking about it, but this is actually a pretty well done one. When the kidnapper made me guess where he kept my daughter, I went for the basement and he said correct, allowing me to see her. But when I found her severed head in there, I learned that every other choice would be correct as well. Very spooky, very hyper-realistic, very mutilated, follows all the same rules of the spooky creepypastas, and it only took 10 seconds to read. The threshold for the people that can now write spooky internet nonsense has been lowered to the ground. Historically speaking, if you wanted to write 9 pages of horror that was somewhat believable and very spooky all the way through, you had to have at least a little bit of writing chops. But now that the bar is just 2 sentences, I mean, anybody could write a 2-sentence horror, except no. Absolutely not. They cannot. So I don't know if this is the first instance of 2-sentence horror going a little bit downhill, but my attention was drawn to this by Fred's mom on my Discord server, who said to check out 2-sentence horror's The Creature, which is a trope in 2-sentence horror. As you guys have seen, there's already been so many tropes in the precursor to 2-sentence horrors that it was only a matter of time before they started to get a little bit samey as well. Let's see how bad it could be. It almost feels like Christmas, except I've got no eggnog. Thankfully, I can just milk some from my creature. That's not all that spooky, my dude. I ran out of ketchup, so I went down to the basement. The creature whimpered. He knows it's time for another milking session. Not scary, kinda weird. I don't think you know where ketchup comes from. The family enjoys their milk at the table. Little do they know it was harvested from my creature. This means your creature could just be a cow. In my head, the timeline wants to set the creature far back. This has been happening for a while. 2-sentence horror has been going downhill for a while, and that's what's led to 2-sentence horrible. The worst spooky stories from the subreddit of 2-sentence horrors has been beautifully cataloged by Bad 2-sentence horror on Twitter. And some of these are just offensively bad. My uncle just groped me. He's been dead for 10 years. followed by 3 ghost emojis. I'm watching some football with my friend Joel. Unfortunately for him, Joel is going to explode into bloody chunks of delicious human meat in about 3 minutes and 52 seconds. You're not even trying. My son was reported missing last week. They found him, but it's not my son. I feel like that one could almost have potential. That's the thing with 2 sentences. You don't get to work in a lot of detail because you only get 2 sentences. I woke up and went downstairs to my kitchen, finding a freshly made batch of fried rice. As I asked myself who made it, I heard a sound behind me, realizing that the pineapple is back. What the fuck is this? Is the horror that there's pineapple in your fried rice, or is this an ongoing thing and I don't know the lore behind the pineapple killing people in this universe? I was beating my wife because she wasn't in the kitchen, but then I realized my wife was dead. Whose wife was I beating? This is just a Family Guy joke.
The other day I stubbed my toe and took it out on the dog. And 2 weeks ago I ran out of vanilla ice cream and struck my wife. And then I find out my wife's been dead for 6 years. Who the hell did I hit?
As I was lifting 425 pounds in the gym, I suddenly noticed something. This already just sounds like a flex of you at the gym. I was actually deadlifting the bloody corpses of my wife and 3 kids that I forgot that I killed yesterday. This is so bad. This is the worst one. This is the worst one I've ever read in my life. My girlfriend wiped the tears from my eyes with a tissue. Little did she know the tears came from the creature I have in the basement. Oh, it all comes full circle. It all comes full circle. It just keeps getting worse. I hope you guys had a laugh at some of these terrible 2-sentence horrors, but more importantly, I hope you have a deeper appreciation for why these are hilariously going downhill, because nobody would care if they were just bad. People care because they used to be so good and such a visceral part of the creepiness of our childhood that watching what they've become now almost feels like growing up. It's not that the stories got less scary. Maybe they're just as scary to Zoomers nowadays, but they're just not scary to us anymore because we've grown up and grown out of it. Maybe we are the real creature. Like and subscribe. Spisu.